John Denver's unexpected death in 1997 shocked the musical world that for decades had relished in his uplifting musical and gentle spirit. He took folk music to a new level with his poetic lyrics, pure tenor vocals, and mastery of the acoustic guitar. His signature, borderline spiritual sound invited audiences to look at the world in all of its natural splendor and glory as he had. During the 1960s, he was one of the most popular acoustic artists around, and by the end of the 70s was one of the overall best-selling artists of all time. But Denver was killed in an experimental aircraft he was illegally piloting that crashed into the Pacific Ocean. He had always had a love for flight, but he never expected his fascination for the open skies would be the death of him. John was always known as a kind-hearted and gentle man. If you had to come up with a list of his faults, it would be difficult. Sadly, the only one that immediately comes to mind is also the one that ultimately proved to be his undoing. Join Facts First as we discuss how John Denver's love of flying was his fatal flaw. John Denver's rise to fame. John Denver was born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on New Year's Eve, 1943. As a teen, he was gifted a 1910 Gibson acoustic guitar from his grandmother. He immediately took a liking to the instrument and started writing his own music. John's dad was an officer in the Air Force. Even as a child, he was fascinated and fixated on all things aviation related. Much like his love for music, this was also a crucial part of his identity, as his love for flight followed him throughout his life. After graduating high school, Denver enrolled at Texas Tech University. He attended from 1961 to 64, but his musical aspirations led him to drop out of school and make his way to New York City in 1965. Once there, Denver beat out 250 other auditioners for a spot in the Chad Mitchell Trio before landing his first big break in 1967. Denver wrote the song "Leaving on a Jet Plane" for the folk outfit Peter, Paul and Mary. The tune was an immediate hit and is now considered a classic. Denver's appeal to music industry insiders was given a huge boost. Studios and execs were drawn to his squeaky clean, wholesome image, but they thought his birth name wasn't conducive to life as a star. After dropping his surname Deutschendorf and adopting Denver, John was seen as much more marketable. He chose the name because he was always drawn to the Rocky Mountains. Not only was it the place where his family had settled, but he also felt inspired by the natural environment. It was the mountainous terrain of Colorado that inspired Denver to write some of his biggest hits. The name change clearly worked, because from the late 60s to the mid-70s, Denver released 6 albums, 4 of which were considered to be commercial successes. Hits from this period included "Take Me Home Country Road," "Thank God I'm a Country Boy," "Annie's Song," and "Rocky Mountain High." The latter even became the official state song of Colorado. Seemingly overnight, Denver's broad appeal and popularity grew to the point where he was playing sold-out shows in auditoriums and stadiums across the nation. Before we tell you more, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Denver was devoted to environmental causes. John didn't just want to be a musical star. Fame, money, and glory weren't enough to make him feel satisfied with what he was doing in life. Instead of simply enjoying a life of lavish luxuries, he used his music and fame to take a stand for issues that mattered to him. As an activist, he was a champion for environmental and humanitarian causes. Groups he raised awareness for included the Cousteau Society, the National Space Institute, Save the Children Foundation, and Friends of the Earth. But he wasn't just content with supporting other organizations and their aims. In 1976, he used his name recognition and finances to co-found the WinStar Foundation, a wildlife preservation and conservation nonprofit. The following year, he co-created the World Hunger Project. To honor him for his humanitarian causes, Presidents Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter awarded Denver with prestigious awards, including the Presidential World Without Hunger Award. Denver was also in a non-fatal plane accident. In April 1989, John Denver was piloting a vintage 1931 biplane when he went in for a landing at the Holbrook Municipal Airport in Arizona. Earlier that day, he had taken off in Carefree, Arizona, and was en route to Santa Fe, but he needed to land halfway through to refuel. While taxiing down the runway at Holbrook, Denver got into an accident when a gust of wind caught the plane and spun it around. While the crash wasn't catastrophic, the plane still sustained extensive damage. Luckily, Denver walked away from that accident completely unharmed. Very few people are fortunate enough to survive a plane crash. Sadly, the singer's luck ran out about 8 years later. John Denver's death. There were very few places John loved to be more than up in the air, behind the yoke of a plane, soaring through the open skies solo. Tragically, it was this love for flying that was his downfall. On October 12, 1997, John took off from Monterey Peninsula Airport, a small regional airport serving Monterey, California. Denver had already performed 3 touch-and-go landings before flying out over the Pacific, but he really shouldn't have been in the air in the first place. At the time, Denver was flying illegally, seeing as how he didn't have a pilot's license at the time. It's also worth noting that at the time of his death, the aircraft he was flying in was previously to blame for 61 accidents, 19 of which proved fatal. At 5:28 p.m., a dozen bystanders witnessed John's experimental Adrian Davis Long Easy plane, which he owned, nosedive into the Pacific. John was killed instantly, but the cause of his fatal crash left much for investigators to dissect. The National Transportation Safety Board eventually determined that a less than ideal placement of a fuel selector valve likely shifted John's attention away from flying. It's theorized that Denver inadvertently steered the craft into a nosedive when he was fumbling around trying to reach the fuel selector's valve handle. The valve's purpose was to switch the engine's fuel intake from one tank to another so the aircraft didn't need to land to refuel. It was later determined that even before takeoff, Denver knew the handle was problematic. The plane's designer had assured John he would fix the fuel valve selector's design and placement before he finished that leg of his tour. Sadly, John never got a chance to see that plan come to fruition. Investigators also concluded Denver hadn't refueled the plane before embarking. If he had, he wouldn't have needed to hit the valve switch mid-flight. While Denver didn't file a flight plan as he should have, he told a mechanic he wouldn't need to refuel since he'd only be up in the air for about an hour. While most people agree John's death was a tragic accident, there are those who believe that, regardless of the poor valve design, it would have been impossible for him to have steered himself into a nosedive without doing so on purpose. But those who knew Denver personally don't believe he would have ever taken his own life. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite memory of John Denver? What's your favorite song of his? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content. By the way, if you haven't joined Facts First as a member yet, be sure to look below this video and click the join button. By becoming a paid member of Facts First, you'll get access to exclusive video content that you won't find anywhere else. This includes some of our more mature content that isn't suitable for public audiences, which includes topics like Hollywood actresses who posed for Playboy and some of the steamiest moments in movie history. Plus, you can enjoy these videos completely ad-free. Our biggest fans will notice they also get badges next to their name when they leave comments on our videos. We pay special attention to comments from our members, and so do other viewers. So if you want exclusive content from Facts First or inside access to discussions with other community members, click the join button to get started for just $4.99. There are hours of members-only videos waiting for you, with new videos added every month. And we're actively working on bringing even more features to help fans like you connect with other members and get more of your favorite content. Just click join, and we'll see you inside the membership tab.